Or something.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Gotta get one of those hood covers, that matches the keys.
Yep.
And then you can store stuff and it doesn't hurt it and it can't get dust in it.
Really? Where do you get those?
Most computer places. Wally World might even have them.
Really?
I don't think this one over, well, yeah, I think it does too.
Really?
Yeah, it does.
Well, I'm gonna get one if that's, because Keith says it's turning on. He said you've got power. He said you should be home.
I got them over at
Pretty close to that time,
Woodcastle
isn't it?
because of all the
Yep.
dust.
Well, yeah.
Sure, kind of idiot.
That's when I go to bed.
I think we are recording. I think it's on.
But anything you can think of about, if
Go
I were
ahead and turn the
taking
tape
someone from
recorder
my
on
shop,
just in case.
It's on.
Washington, the Red Schoolhouse, the
You can get the
hospital, there's
garbage
some things about the
disposal.
hospital I don't understand. Because from my understanding,
make
the
digital
hospital
film.
in Hospital Canyon
Does that got
was never a
sound too?
hospital. They said there was a doctor there and he died, so they tore it down. So what is the old hospital?
That's a misnomer.
Grinder.
It is too.
Yes, I'm thinking so too, from
Yeah,
what
the
I'm
building-
reading.
The building they call the old hospital wasn't the hospital at all. That was old Wetby's house. And the building that was a temporary facility was an old log cabin behind.
It's behind.
And that was a temporary facility like what?
That's what we heard.
For a hospital.
The cabin behind.
Honey, was that a pest house? Did they call that a pest house?
Well, your mom always said it was just the old hospital, and it was just an old log building, and that it was moved down. Old Westerby moved it down out of the canyon, but it was never really used as a hospital.
Which one was moved? The old log cabin in back?
Yeah.
Not the one they call the hospital?
No, the one in front was Westerby's home.
There was a little foundation there, that was the old hotel or something.
That's the old Penn Hotel, I think. I'm not sure if it was a Penn, but there was an old hotel right behind the big, what's Dave want to call his place?
Lonely Bear.
Lazy
the-
Bear.
Lazy Bear?
Lazy Bear.
Lazy Bear. That foundation back there, that's one, John? No, that was an old hotel.
So there was a hotel back there where the Lazy Bear is?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I've heard
Johnny's got a picture of it sometime.
questions
if
as
you'd
to
like
whether or
to-
not that was the Cole Hotel or
Can
the
I
Penn
Xerox
Hotel.
it?
Which one?
You know, I've heard it both ways too,
You think it
you know,
was?
and,
What was the number
I,
of it?
I think it's,
It was called either the Cole or the Penn.
Cole or Penn?
We could probably find out for sure, you know.
and
Okay.
Winnie might know something on that too.
Okay.
She might have some
Put a
information on that.
question mark there. And so that was back to Lazy Bear and there's a foundation. I hadn't even seen it. I'm gonna look.
Yeah. There's a picture of some of the old pictures show that old building back there, two-story building.
Two-story. Okay, and so the hospital was just a misnomer, and it was Westerby's home. And then he was the taxidermist. And then I heard that he committed suicide. Was that true?
No,
Was it him?
No.
Nobody did.
he died during World War II.
Huh.
He died while I was in service.
I wonder where I heard that.
Well, and I remember him, I don't remember
He
saying.
didn't commit suicide.
Huh.
It was the guy that owned the bull, wasn't it?
I don't know.
Yeah, he owned Garnet, the Red Bull. Yeah, big old bull.
Now
Some
what was
people-
that?
Some people surmised that Lily Smith committed suicide. She was the old gal that inherited Westerby's house and was living in it. But nobody knew for sure.
She didn't commit suicide.
Hmm.
But that's just hearsay.
Right. Well, I had heard that, so that's not correct.
The picture that Fritz has in the paper,
Mhm.
that shows those 4 cars behind that house there at Lazy Bear,
Yeah.
those cars may very well have been men that were talking about opening up the Edison mine. That's just about the same time. There was Charlie O'Connor, there was Steve Guerin, there was a fellow named Judkins, and there was the Krishna brothers. And my dad was in on some of the work. And I think probably those cars, that could have been what those cars was doing there.
Now, was that the early 1930s or late 20s?
Early 1930s.
Okay.
Opening up the Edison mine at Midnight Anchor.
That had been abandoned by the Edison group a long time ago, hadn't it?
It's been abandoned quite a while. Then during the Depression, they thought they'd start it up again. Steve Guerin was a Russian of Russian descent, and when he came here, he was driving a black Auburn convertible. And you talk about something pretty. It was beautiful. It had the old suicide doors that opened, opened like bat wings to the front.
Wasn't one of the old boat tails, was it?
I cannot shoot truthfully, Chris. It was about probably when Steve Guerin came, it was between the era of between 1930 and 1934, along that era.
Okay.
And then they built the Heartbreak Mill down here, the other side Terrace Towers, and they were going to process gold or ore from the Memphis mine down here at the mill. And Steve Guerin put up the money, Charlie O'Connor was a promoter, and Judkins was his sidekick.
Did they ever really process anything there with it?
They processed it good. I don't think it wasn't profitable, so they ran out of money. But there was a little tiny tailings pond there.
It's history.
But most all of the mines I've read about just didn't make it, except they said black copper was really.
I'm talking about the businesses.
Oh, well, you're right. Mm-hmm.
It's hard to make a living here.
You're right.
Still.
It still is.
Well, most people come to town still looking for gold.
Yeah,
Don't they?
that's true.
They find fool's gold.
That's
Stars in their
true.
eyes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's a rude shock for them.
And it really is.
This town hasn't really changed that much, has it, John? In terms of, it's the same kind of mentality a lot of people come to town with.
Yep. Stars in their
I'm
eyes.
gonna get rich quick.
Stars in their
And a
eyes.
lot of
Lady up
times,
at the Emma's in San Luis said that mine had a cutoff of 0.3 of an ounce of gold to a ton of rock.
Gosh.
It says to me that if there's any gold here in the Red River, somebody would be up there mining it, and there must not be any.
I don't think there is any.
You
There
can-
was gold here in Placer Creek. And during the Depression, when I went to school up here, I went to the river for water up there, right where Wayne Kidd has his shop. Right there was a footbridge. And there were two guys coming down that, they call that Prospector Trail, coming down, and they stopped to visit with me. And they had aspirin bottles that were full of gold, little gold nuggets, and they gave me one about the size of your little fingernail. And just about the thickness of a
Gary
knife.
Starbuck and Don Carmichael panned all one summer up there. And they got a little aspirin bottle full of
And that's what
gold.
these guys had.
Hmm.
Not much for a summer's
There-
work, because I don't know how much drinking we did.
there really wasn't enough of any value to make anything. Colorado mining camps all developed into more. Red River never.
We were a
really
camp, not a town.
Really didn't get more out of a camp.
And what's the difference between the camp and the town?
Not permanent.
Wasn't permanent, and you know, in
Okay.
Colorado, they had rock buildings, or lots of them.
Masonry building, brick
Masonry.
building.
Okay.
Victorian architecture.
Gotcha,
Well, I
right.
kinda got the feeling that Red River got to be a town because of land speculators as much as anything.
That's part of it.
That's right.
It's kinda reading between the lines, it was like the gold was the lure. And then they got
Yeah.
people in, and wasn't it a Colorado group that, out of Colorado Springs or
I've
something, that
heard
got
that
into it
story.
with the Millettes?
Yep, I've heard that story.
I've read this story, but I didn't know how valid it was.
Yeah, I think it's true. And the town was founded about 1895, as I recall. And that's about the time a lot of people came for land when the town was developed. And they were prospectors.
Well, that's when your grandfather and family came.
Yeah, when
Was it at
1895.
95? Now, where did they come from?
They came from El Moro, Colorado, over by Trinidad.
Okay.
My granddad came from Chicago, and he brought his family to El Moro. I don't know how long they were in El Moro, and then they came on over here.
And that was the railhead at that time, El Moro,
El Moro.
outside of Trinidad.
Hmm.
And that's where your dad was born, and then he came on over here as a little boy,
So they were there till like 10 years then, Del Moro.
chances are.
Daddy was, if that's where he was born about 84, 85.
So they were still up here when it was pretty woolly over in that part of the country.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my uncle, my dad's brother Charlie was killed in a mine at Tercio. Tercio's a coal mine over this side of Trinidad. Just when you come out of Trinidad, Colorado and go toward the Romeo Park, you go through Tercio. And Joe Phipps and others were working also at that mine. And my dad, I think, was working there, but Joe Phipps or some of the guys from here rode over there and wanted them to come for a dance on the weekend. And so they missed work. And the day they missed work is when the mine blew up. My Uncle Charlie stayed there and he was killed in the mine.
What year was that?
My dad was born in 84, 85. So I would say it's probably 1905, 1907, somewhere along there.
Coal mines blew up a lot back then, didn't they?
Did, and Rosie and I went to look for it, see if we could find any evidence in the cemetery at Trinidad, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a big monument there for that explosion with the date and when it happened.
Usually, I can still remember the mules they used right there.
All around Trinidad.
Yeah.
And they used mules because of the danger of explosion. They wouldn't use automated equipment. There ain't so much methane gas. So.
Well, they would have huge, long barns that they kept
I
the
remember
mules
those. I just
in.
go right on past and I can still remember those mules.
Yeah.
I see my dad bought a ranch over there.
That's where he died, wasn't it?
He died in Trinidad.
And the coke ovens, you'd go, they'd ride the bus between Raton and Trinidad, and at night, the coke ovens would all be on fire.
Yeah.
They use mules down here. Burros, not mules.
Yeah.
Burros, this mine.
At the Millennium.
Uh-huh. I've got no picture. That might be an old picture you'd like to have sometime.
I'd like to see it, yeah.
I've got an old picture. I've even got a negative on it.
Well, you'll have to come up with and look at it.
But it shows that all the miners down there at the mine back about 1924, 25, with all the little burros.
Uh-huh.
And when I was a kid growing up here, the mine rotated their burros working in the mine. They give them like a week on and a week off. And when the little guys had a week off, they would wander up here, and all the kids in town rode them. We'd all try to ride the burros.
One of my first jobs down there, when I worked there, it was an open pit. And one of my first jobs was to take those old surveys of the old tunnels and plot them with respect to what we were doing to make sure there wasn't any danger to the trucks and shovels. And if you could imagine taking a bucket full of earth, and taking a handful of earthworms and dropping them in that bucket, and then plotting the path of those earthworms, that's the way those old tunnels, those darn things just went everywhere.
They followed the vein, didn't they?
Yeah, they literally followed the vein, and we finally decided they were so small. We had some stopes. I had plots of these stopes, which is where they would stope out the vein. Some of them were like 2 and 3 feet wide, about 200 feet high. They just literally just mined the vein and nothing else. And they didn't present any danger to the people on the surface. I think one time we had a raise open up under a shoal, and luckily nobody fell in it. The rest of the time we never even saw it. This one opened up, and he just took a bucket full of muck and dropped it in the hole and just kept going.
Solved that.
Yeah. He just kept going. And they had names for some of those raises. They call one Big John raise. And, why does it cause that? Well, that's where Big John fell. His death. Fell down the raise.
Now, how long has that molybdenum mine been operating down there?
1920s.
And I know they were digging down there in the teens, but had they?
His dad, he filed on it first, didn't he?
The grandfather.
They called it Brandenburg Gulch.
My granddad.
It was Harry and.
My granddad here.
Mm-hmm.
Before, I tell you, it was right at the time of World War I.
Okay.
Because the German guns would fire longer than ours. And they couldn't figure out why until when they analyzed, they found out they were alloyed with molybdenum. And the Germans had discovered molybdenum, and we weren't aware of the alloy, is what I understand. And that's when molybdenum came.
And it did what? It caused them to...
Real high-strength steel.
Real high-strength steel. Gears, pistons, engines are made of...
Kept them from melting.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I know your mom told a story about Harry, your granddad, filing on the molybdenum mine. He and somebody else, and I can't remember the other man's name. But when they sent their assays off, then it all came back
Graphite.
graphite
I
and
just
all
read
this
that.
stuff. And then they thought, well, who wants this? So then they just gave it all up. Then somebody else came right along behind them and
I've got a
filed it.
picture, honey, that Wayne Riley sent us of the people that were part of the original people that found them all.
Is that right? Well,
And I think he's even got the names on the
well,
back.
that's good. That's good.
Well, now, was Westerby involved with that in the early days?
That's what I read.
Westy wasn't involved with anything really.
Is
Okay.
that right?
They give him a lot of
I see
credit
his
for
name
being such a
everywhere.
hero, and really he wasn't all that.
He was just here, huh?
He walked around to Anthony's pockets and went for the
Right.
mail.
Right.
You are
What
kidding.
really wasn't too ambitious.
Westby didn't have anything. He married,
Why do
the
they
gal he
do
married
that?
was a widow, and she had inherited property and et cetera from her husband, and Westby married her. And Westby was just a hunter, a trapper, and a taxidermist.
Yep,
Whatever he was.
they said he was a trapper, a prospector, and a taxidermist. Is
Mainly
that
a-
right?
Mainly a taxidermist.
Mainly a
I don't
And a
think he
trapper.
was too much of a prospect because they work too hard. He wasn't that ambitious.
That's funny. And what about some other buildings that you can tell me, like,
Well, honey, the old
Where?
Real Colorado building was the old frat home, and then the one that, the little log next to it, that the Janny girls had their little cafe in, and it's still there.
They're still there.
that little one cabin that kind of faces the main street by the Lazy Miner?
They're the lazy mine, right.
Mhm.
Somebody ran that cafe and there was a guy that did pantomimes in there. You remember that?
Kelly's.
Yes, the Kellys, remember?
Kelly boys.
Mr. Booker had those.
Do you remember Grandma's Lysol?
Well, and they did, the one that,
Mule train.
Mule Train,
Yeah.
you know.
No, come in. Woo-hoo. So the cabin next to the Lazy Miner was a little cafe, and it was who ran it?
No, it was, the Patrick Sports Shop.
Patrick's.
That little log house, Walter Janney built for his wife and their two daughters.
Yeah, that's okay.
And then he built a little, when the girls were out of high school, he built a little cafe, they had a little cafe that was a portable building right in front of that log cabin.
Oh,
And then the Janneys sold out and left, and somebody bought that little building and moved it over where Patrick Sports Shop is. And that's,
a main building.
that's for the new, that was
you're
a,
talking about Patrick's Clothing?
yeah,
That was the portable building that was in front of the cabin?
that's where they started. They moved the building from Janneys across the street over there for Patrick's.
Oh.
Now, did Janney's build the Rio Colorado?
No,
No.
Pratt did. Lyman Pratt. Lyman Pratt was married to Elizabeth Moots. Elizabeth Moots was the aunt of Gene Young
And Johnny Woods.
and Johnny Moots.
Now, that was the Elizabeth of Elizabethtown? No? This is
Well,
different.
she was Elizabeth. She
Wasn't Elizabeth, though?
But she
Okay.
wasn't Elizabeth of
The Elizabethtown was
no.
Elizabeth Moore, I
Was
believe.
Was it?
Yeah,
Okay.
but she was from the Moots family,
Mm-hmm.
and she married Lyman Pratt. Lyman Pratt was the son of H.L. Pratt, who was the developer of the Carabel mine. And the Pratts had their home right where Lazy Miner is.
Oh, really? The Pratt's home was Lazy Miner?
Yeah, where Lazy Miner is now.
Okay.
That's not the same building,
No.
but it was H.L.
You mean the
Pratt.
same building is gone?
It's
just
gone.
Pratt's were there before
They were
Lazy
there,
Miner.
and the Carabel mine was named after his wife and his daughter.
Hmm.
His wife was Belle, he called her Belle, and the daughter was Caroline, and they call it Carabel.
Now, where did Pratt come from before he came up here to develop the mine? Do you know?
No, I'm not sure where H.L. Pratt came from. His son was Lyman. His son was Lyman Pratt. They married Elizabeth, and they started the Rio Colorado.
Okay.
Okay, that's the Rio Colorado.
And Lyman made his living with trucking. He had a big old Diamond T truck and a big old Federal truck that he would have hell starting in the wintertime. And they used so much gas, he used to carry 50-gallon barrel of gas on the back because they just
What was that?
slurped the gas tank.
That girl that came up during the bicentennial.
Okay, so the Rio
Francis?
Colorado.
Francis with it?
I don't know how much oil that Carabel processed, but she made a statement one day that surprised me, and she said, "I wish I had a nickel for every gold bar I stacked." That struck me as funny. But this is one of the Millette girls.
Sound like Francis.
She was
which
from
from-
California.
I think that's Francis. She was the daughter of the people that had the house back up there behind Herman Roots on the other side. Johnny a Bobcat. She was with that family.
So the Rio Colorado was Lyman and Elizabeth Pratt.
Uh-huh.
And then that's where they started it and they lived.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and
They lived in the
then-
house right where the offices, no, where the owners house is right there when you go in,
Mhm.
the first house on the right,
The very first house on the
the
right?
very first house on the right, that's where they lived.
Because that's real old, you can tell.
Well, that's where they lived.
Who lives there now?
That's just
The
rented
Bookers?
out. Do that?
The Booker descendants of the Bookers,
They just leave that open until they come.
they
isn't
just
it?
keep it, I think, just for
They
the
don't rent it
reserve for the
out.
I don't
family.
think so.
And so then the cabin next to that was Joe Janney built for his wife and daughters.
No,
I mean,
the house
on-
next to it was the Sherrard house. Ed Sherrard. And Ed Sherrard was married to somehow to some of the Janney girls. I'm not just sure how the connection was.
Okay, I mean that little cabin on the front street.
That was built by Walter Janney. There was an uncle, would have been an uncle of Joe.
Mm-hmm. So Walter Janney did that. But that's
Yeah.
that little cabin that you said had a portable building in front.
Yeah,
But the cabin, they lived in it. It was a house.
that was their home.
That was their home.
How many cabins were in the original Rio Colorado? Do you remember?
They just built them one at a time. And I think the original ones were built out of reject ties from the sawmills. Lyman, he hauled things on his truck. And I think he got an in with the mills and would buy the old reject ties and put them into cabins.
Good way to do it.
Now Patrick's now, that portable building, all of Patrick's was that portable
No,
building?
no, party, it was just before they started. It was, it wasn't probably maybe 8 foot wide,
Mm-hmm.
8 foot wide, and maybe 16 foot long. Approximately, I'm just guessing. And the girls, they made homemade pies, and sold pies. And
What was it called? Is it just Janny's or?
I'm trying to think what they called it. It had a name.
Wasn't it named after one of the girls?
Well, there was Bertha May and Ann Mildred.
Home of,
I can't remember.
Was anything across from the Rio Colorado, or that was pretty empty?
No, there was a store. There was a building right where Resort Realty is.
Where we
There was a
sold
building there.
royalty?
And when you looked at those pictures, that's like Fritz had in the paper. You can see a building right on the corner. But I'm not sure what was there.
Okay.
Charlie Romer tear that down to start.
I think
his-
that's where he tore it down and built his place.
He tore it down and moved it? Or
Just tore it down.
he just tore it
It was
down.
just-
He had a garage, he built a garage.
And then,
behind it was Cap Johnson's little old store, and
oh yeah, behind that, on that side street. That would be good to know too.
T.D. Neal Mercantile. It was right where the laundry?
Mm-hmm.
The laundry is now right along where the laundry is.
where the laundry is. In fact, they rejuvenated that little old building into that, I think, as I remember.
Maybe part of it.
And then what about that other building past the laundry? Is there one or two buildings?
It was Fink's Grocery. And then there was
Fink's?
Conoco. Fink's.
Things.
F-I-N-K.
That big old building, the big building that Steiner owns there on the corner,
Mm-hmm.
that's what John was talking about.
And then there was a Conoco station next to it.
And it's gone.
Yeah, there's nothing on that lot now.
Used to play a slot machine.
He had slot sheet back in the back.
In fact, George Fink and his cousin Rokie brought that little old filling station there. And Fink built the big old building, didn't he? The
Yeah.
big old store building.
Had a nickel slot machine there, and never made a nickel.
You wouldn't want to, John.
Not that much.
And then, is there anything about the Lazy Bear that might be good to know back in there?
That's where Tilly and Tony started.
Oh,
Right there, when you go, you know where Paul Armstrong had that A-frame? On
Mhm.
the other side of the A-frame is a building.
little cabin?
No, the one that's the Lazy Bear office, the house,
Okay.
the yellow one.
Mhm.
And this side of it, there was a little cabin. And that's where Tilly started her evergreen sandwich shop.
Was that also the old
Jalapeno
hospital too? Is that-
No, it was down behind Westby's.
Was that jalapeno pizza?
That was jalapeno pizza.
Jalapeno pizza.
You mean Tilly's with jalapeno pizza?
No, it was Tilly's sandwich shop.
Okay. I mean,
Jalapeno pizza
yeah.
is
Came
modern
later.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that, but
So
that's the building we're talking
You
about.
heard the stories when they
Okay.
opened up the walls and everything, and they found newspapers, dated, because that's what they use for insulation, and they found some old Wheaties boxes in there with, whatever Breakfast of Champions person was on there back then.
I got some tables I bought from Gary, yeah. And I went ahead and gave them to the library, and they said it came from Johnson's Mercantile, or do you think it was T.D. Neal?
T.D. Neal, it was T.D. Neal Mercantile,
And that's where
and
those
Horace
come
Johnson. Horace Johnson was related to T.D. Neal somehow, and he ran the place.
from.
He
Okay.
and his wife Mary. And Mary Johnson was a postmaster.
But it was actually T.D. Neal's Mercantile.
That's correct.
But those, so that's where those tables came from.
And
So
that's-
I'll
You
pass
got
that
a
on.
picture of that old building with old
That's-
Mary Johnson on the
That's
front.
Yeah, I've got a
Neil,
picture.
what's
I
his
need to
name?
Xerox some of those things. Just Xerox would be great.
I've got a picture. I've got a picture of Mary Johnson, some of her
Okay.
family standing in front of the old store.
Okay. And then the Red Schoolhouse, any more you can think of about that?
The red schoolhouse was never red, it was always yellow.
I have.
Was it yellow?
Yeah, it was yellow. It was yellow. You can look at the old pictures, like some that you've seen, Fritz,
Uh-huh.
and you'll see it's a
Well, they
light
didn't
cream
paint
colored
it
or,
red until after the
I
Women's
have the
Club
old
started
tins
using
from it. Some,
What?
Gary Penley gave me some tins from that, so it is yellow. I saw that.
That's
No, I'm lying. I think that came, well, maybe it's true. I'm trying to think if that was off the hospital or the schoolhouse, but I think
no,
it's
it's
schoolhouse.
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 And
Schoolhouse,
it was
right.
creamy color.
Yeah, one book I came across described it as a little gray schoolhouse, and I thought, maybe the paint had faded. You know?
It was always light
It was
colored.
creamy.
Yeah.
It was a creamy color when I first came up here.
So when did they decide to paint it red?
After the Women's Club
Post-World War
started
II.
using.
It was in the 50s, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Late
it
50s?
Yeah,
was up
probably
in the
50s.
50s, I'm sure it
The
was.
60s, because the Women's Club started in the 60s, didn't it, Rosie?
Oh, no, before that, honey.
And
I'm
then,
thinking it was like 1960.
and then they, at one point they jacked it up to do the basement.
That was a WPA job
Is
During
that
the-
right? We
during the
piddle
war.
around.
during the Depression. That was a make-work job, and they elevated that building. The building used to sit right down on the ground.
Oh, for gosh sakes.
It had an old, yeah, it had a, in 1934, I built fires in the schoolhouse. I built the fires for $5 a month. And I'd have to get up real early in the morning and go up to build the fires in the schoolhouse, so it'd be warm when the kids got there for school. And Lyman Pratt hauled the wood, and the woods were in 3 and 4 foot chunks of aspen, and that's what we used for fuel. Then they elevated that thing probably about 1937 or a year or two, one way or the other. Probably a year before. They jacked it up so they could have an apartment for the school teacher and storage and heating system. They put a new furnace in, new coal furnace. It had coal in one end of it, and then a teacher's apartment, and then storage.
So the teacher lived in the school.
Uh-huh.
How'd you go outside though?
The bathroom. They had a
Yeah.
two-path toilet behind.
A what?
Two-path toilet.
Two-path toilet.
Yeah. It was the same building, it just depended which side you want to go to. You go one side of the building or the other side.
And then if you're anything back in that area, because I'd like to start out where my story is and kind of walk. And I know the Lode must have a tremendous amount of history. And
The
the Mother Lode. The Mother Lode that is now the bar. Mother Lode.
Well, just Tony's.
Well, that
It
was
was
Tony's
Tony's
bar.
Joey's
bar.
and Mrs. Nicky's.
Was there nothing there before Tony put that up?
Yeah, there had been a bar there previous.
What was it
There-
called?
And I don't recall what the name of the bar was, because it was before my time. But my dad used to tell a story about there was a little kind of a dwarf person in town, and he would try to go in the bar to drink with the rest of the miners, and they would pick him up and throw him out because he was so small. They told me he was a kid, and he went and got a broomstick and cut a broomstick the same length as a stick of dynamite, and wrapped it in dynamite paper, and stuck a fuse on it, and lit it and threw it in the bar, and boy, he emptied the bar. And when they all came back, he was in the bar by himself.
Oh, that's a great
That's
story.
really
I never
cute.
heard that one told.
Was he a miner?
Yeah, he was here. He was prospecting.
No, he was just short, he wasn't a man.
Yeah, well. Oh.
Oh, that's good.
Well, there was a mine, Jolene, right behind the schoolhouse.
Is that right?
There's a tunnel there, and I don't know what they call it. Probably,
It's
it
the
probably.
Esther Lode.
I'm gonna say probably the extra load or some of those, John.
The what?
But
Esther.
Esther Lode.
Esther
As in
Lode?
Esther Williams.
Yeah.
Lode, and she was Esther Mode before she married the old doctor. She's one of the Mode
Hope.
girls.
Hope, wasn't it?
Elsie Wade Hope.
Elsie Wade Hope.
And who was the doctor she married?
Hope, Dr. Hope. But that was Esther Lode. And there was a man, the mine caved in on him, and my dad and Earl Fuller went in and got him out, but he was dead when they got.
And where was that?
Right behind the school.
That one.
Right
So
behind
it
the
was
school.
caved in.
There was even a kind of a mill back there. Do you remember that, Johnny? It was kind of a mill, but I was just small. I don't remember what it was. But I know there was a mill building back behind there, and there's a big old dumper. That's a depot tunnel.
Really? Back in there?
A depot tunnel.
Well, did you know right,
Horizontal, not vertical. Horizontal. It didn't go down. It went back in the mountain.
just the other side of Sampson's, you know, there was an old tunnel opened up. I don't know if they've got that closed up
Yeah.
now again, but.
It's open again.
Is it open again?
There's something by the Sampsons. There's an old.
It's down there where Roy Lyles'
You know, where that little old blue
Sure.
house is.
house, yeah.
It's kind of opened up again.
And that was a little mine.
Mhm, it was a
Prospect
mine.
Hole.
Prospect Hole.
Prospect Hole.
Prospect
Yeah.
Hole.
Uh-huh.
That sounds like all that there was here.
Well, that's the way they did it in those days. Nowadays, they diamond drill. In those days, they just dug a prospect
That's right, just dug a
by
hole.
hand.
Dolly Johnson she and Will Johnson had Pioneer Lodge. And Dolly used to have bonfires every Wednesday night. And on Wednesday night, she would have different old timers come down and talk to the visitors from out of state or wherever, and tell them what happened here. And I can remember one fellow, Slim McCombs, was a local wit, and he went down to entertain the people, and I didn't ask him, what made all these holes on these hills? And Slim McCombs says, I'll tell you, it was an animal that walks on his hind legs and he's beaten with a knife. That's who dug them.
Oh, cute. An animal who walks on his hind legs.
And they beamed with a knife.
There's a lot of holes around here.
Yeah, and a lot of them they covered up for it. There's one down there behind Red River Inn,
Mm-hmm.
the old Jumping Jacks, that was covered up. It wasn't too deep, but there were two tunnels. Went in like this, right there behind Red River Inn. The people, they filled it up to keep people out of it.
We used to have open gambling at Tony's. And
Yeah.
the state started cracking down on it, so he moved the gambling out to the ice house.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember he used to have a valet. Those men would come in from the ice house, and he had a valet there to
Scrape the ice.
no, sawdust.
No, it's
Brush the
not.
sawdust off of them. I can still remember them, that valet brushing those men off.
After they come out of the ice house.
Mhm.
Because they use sawdust to insulate those ice
I
houses.
had heard that.
There was open gambling when I was a kid, and Johnny Miller too, of course. We grew up with open gambling. And I've got pictures of some of the gamblers, Wesley West, Cleo Ficklin,
Jimmy Fellows.
Uncle Billy Snyder, Jimmy Feller. I've got pictures of those
Jimmy
fellows.
Ferris.
Jimmy Ferris. They were gamblers here. They worked for Tony's Bar and for Dan Zana's Bar. Who, Mama?
Nettie Maloof.
Nettie Maloof, yeah.
And so that was their profession. They were gambling.
They were professional gamblers.
And when did the gambling end?
About 1947.
And then, you know, you've got, you know how they took that cabin beside the Bobcat and then they built around it? There was an old cabin
Well,
there.
that was the Gallagher's house.
That was the Gallagher's house, and they built around it. That cabin is right in the center.
I think
And
that old
that's
cabin
where-
was built of logs or ties
It
also.
was.
I think it was built of ties.
The back of the Bobcat?
Beside it, Wild
Right beside
Bill's.
it, Gallagher.
Alongside,
Wild
just the other
Bill's?
side. Where this fella has a ski
Cabin's
shop
right
now.
inside there.
Yeah,
I
we used
remember
to,
when they enclosed it.
we used it as storage when we first moved to town, and they had been using it as a stable years before that. I mean,
It
they
was
had
a
bridles and some things in there too, but it told me that it once
When did they
it'd been
move?
lived in.
To the
Oh, yeah.
ranch up
Yeah. Old Morris Gallagher lived in it.
Well, that-
The Opal and all of this.
And Opal.
They were there, they were up there when I still lived over where Wayne Kidd
And
lived.
Morris, is that, who's
And so
Morris?
that was
Morris
probably
Gallagher was the daddy.
The dad.
That was
Opal's dad.
Bud and Opal.
How about 1938?
Opal and Bud and
1938.
Pearl
I
and
saw.
the whole family.
And then Patrick's basically has
And she
been
said
built
that-
onto
Oh.
from that one little old thing.
That's right.
Has
That's
And
right.
then, of course, the hardware used to be, that Log Hardware used to be,
Next door.
because I remember that vacationing here and then it burned.
Right.
Well, you hear, John?
And
Oh, I said, I think
is
he just ran
anything
over
else
the
right in
table.
that area?
On
Yeah,
the
he's
video.
not in very good health.
He's been ill health for a long time. He had
It
He
would
had
be good to
a
walk.
tumor
I
sometime.
know.
It'd be good to walk.
Yeah.
I
And
need
then
to-
those things come back to you.
I may have to get y'all to walk.
Jolene,
Mm-hmm.
when I went to school up here,
Mm-hmm.
one of my first teachers was Miss Lambert. And she was just a young woman and she was very attractive. And Joe Janney courted Miss Lambert. And the Gallaghers lived up, well, remind me that Judy won't know when the Gallaghers built a house up here. The Gallaghers lived up top of the old pass, the Gallagher family.
The Gallagher family did?
Uh-huh. They lived up on top of the old pass. And their access was through Road Canyon. Right above Tall Pine, that's where they got to their ranch.
Do you know the old homestead on one of my ski trails?
That's the
Yeah.
one.
That's it.
Is that right?
That's where they lived when we were kids.
Out in the cross-country area where all those houses are. Well, I'll beat 'em.
And
And
one
that was the
time,
Gallaghers.
and the Gallaghers decided to have a taffy pull for the kids in the school that wanted to come on for some occasion. I don't remember what it was now. But Joe Janney and Miss Lambert took all of us kids up to horseback at night.
Whoa!
In the wintertime.
That was a long
A lot of
way.
snow and cold.
Son
I remember
of a-
we sang all the way up and all the way back. Buffalo Girls, are you coming out tonight? And of course, Joe and Miss Lambert kept pulling,
Pulling ahead.
bringing up the rear.
I just bet they did.
Well, they wanted to be sure that no kids were left in the snowbank.
Uh-huh. Yeah, sure. Yeah,
But
yeah, right.
Where did the Phipps come in with that area up there? I thought they were the,
Charlie Phipps was an uncle, or brother. Charlie Phipps was a brother of Mrs. Gallagher.
didn't they help to homestead that up there?
That
too?
was Charlie Phipps.
Joe
Oh.
and Charlie Phipps.
That Charlie Phipps was where the Gallagher lived with Charlie Phipps, and Morris Gallagher's wife was a sister of Charlie Phipps, and Joe Phipps he
So
homesteaded the other
both
part.
families were up there then?
Joe Phipps
Oh.
and Charlie Phipps. But Joe never lived up there in the wintertime. He just had a little cabin up there for summertime.
Now, across from that the thing I call the bunkhouse, that we still use,
Mm-hmm.
there's a stove in it, I can't put a stove in it.
Mm-hmm.
Across that meadow, this would be on Joe Phipps's place. There's an old tumble-down log cabin where they built the hearth inside the walls. And I can't find any.
Oh, it's back in the trees?
Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of digs over there. And I
Yeah.
can't find anybody that knows anything about it.
You know, John, I don't know anything about that cabin. I know what you're talking
It probably
about.
has to date from the 1860s. like
Hmm.
that.
I bet it does too.
Probably when they were building the trestle for that flume.
Oh, yeah.
That could very well be.
But there's not much left. There's a few walls.
The hearth was made of mud, wasn't it?
Inside the
Mud and rock.
Yeah.
What did you say that where the Gallagher's house was? I know where it is. You called it some kind of pass? Some a
Road-
Road Canyon.
Road Canyon.
Road Canyon.
Up Road Canyon.
I've ridden horseback up that, and then when we built the area, I thought, well, I'll see what that's like, and it's gone completely back to nature now. You can't even walk it.
Is that-
Hmm.
And that's something we've always wanted to
I
do.
tried to hike it, and I just turned around and said, it's not worth it.
Well, if you turn around, I'm sure enough I'm going to try it.
We were gonna do it, cause that's where, didn't you say Dummy Hoover?
Dummy Hoover.
Had his, prospect
On
hole.
radio.
How did he get that
Dummy
Dummy
He was deaf and dumb.
Oh,
Deaf and dumb.
really?
And he had a mule with a two-wheel cart, and he would come down in town and he'd take little kids for a ride for a quarter.
Is it making?
Back then, that was pretty common to call people that were deaf and
Yeah, I know.
used to be dummy.
You, you
Well, you know,
don't,
and
you
an
don't say
interesting
that
thing-
now.
Tony Timmy and I walked up Road Canyon when we were kids, and of course we stopped to visit all the miners in the country. We'd visited all of them, and we stopped to see Dummy Hoover, and there was food on the table and his glasses were on the table, but we never heard or seen of Dummy Hoover again.
You're kidding.
No, we
Oh,
never.
no.
He just gone. We don't know whatever become of Dummy Hoover.
Well, I read where, I guess it's up midnight, that all of a sudden they left to go prospecting in E-Town, and people left their plates like they were set to eat, and they never returned.
Cripple Creek was around.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds possible.
That
We
is-
heard, I
okay.
heard that.
I think your mother
Johnny's
told me
mom
that.
told that.
Huh.
The story?
She told me that they left so fast, they just left their dishes and they went to Cripple Creek.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yep.
I believe it.
Reminds you of the Anasazis, how they suddenly disappeared and they don't know why, because they left food cooking and it was gone.
Well, the word, somebody comes with the word, well, you know, the
Mhm.
place to be is there. And
They
they
found
were all
gold.
so eager, they just would load in the wagon and away they'd go.
They weren't getting anything where they were at either, were they?
That's right. No,
There
no.
wasn't much on the plate.
No, they probably wouldn't.
I'll tell you something else that's kind of interesting, Jolene. The house that Chris Peterson has been remodeling behind Pioneer Lodge,
Mm-hmm.
that was, my dad and mother lived there when they were first married.
Is that right?
And my grandparents lived on down this way, right behind, right across the dumpsters at Red River Inn. My granddad and grandmother had a house there.
There's nothing there now. Is that right?
There's nothing there. There's a cabins in between, but there's nothing right on that spot.
What's the story of the mining company? Mrs. Reed built that, or is that?
No, that was built by my dad built that for my granddad and his second wife. Where JD is now,
Yeah.
that was the original Red River Inn.
Is that right?
Yeah. My dad built that for my granddaddy and his
And
second
the lady
wife.
from Clovis, had the old Monterey.
Sis Reed.
Sis Reed.
She had a Mexican restaurant there later
When did it become home of hot biscuits?
with my granddad and his second wife. Home of fried chicken, hot biscuits.
This
And that's
lady,
what it was called?
Yeah.
Home of fried chicken?
She was related to Buster Brown somehow.
She was an honorable heifer. Really was. She had white hair like my wife, and everybody in town used to call her a little silver tip.
Silver tip.
You know, with a short tail, she was hard to get along with.
Well, in the picture that Fritz had, they had in the Miner here a couple of weeks ago of where JD's building is, and then the house on Millette where kids live,
Yeah.
and there's a lady walking across the back. That lady is Johnny's mom. They
Oh, it
lived in
is.
that house.
They lived in what house?
Where Wayne and Marcia.
Wayne and Marcia. So your parents lived in that house in Wayne and
Well, but there
Marcia.
wasn't a house there though at that time, was there? Wayne and Marcia's house wasn't there.
No,
There was
no,
a different
but
house.
it was.
Oh, no, it's the same house.
Was it?
Wayne, of course,
Yeah.
it was the same
duplex,
house.
wasn't it?
basically, but Wayne, of course, has
redone
made it an excellent dwelling.
Okay.
Well, and the Fallhavers did a lot of work on it.
Starbucks lived there for a while.
Yeah, and I know
I've been
Fallhavers.
down underneath Wayne's house,
I have two.
on the backside there.
You can still see where it was, older
Pretty-
unit.
Pretty old structures in
Well, the
Johnny
house
said
next to them, too.
His favorite bedroom was in that house because it had a tin roof and he was right by the creek, and then when it would rain, the
You can hear all the raindrops.
rain.
Oh,
on
yeah.
the tin
I
And I
lived in a
opened the
house
window
with a
to the
tin
water.
roof as a kid. And I liked it when it rained.
When I started to tell you about that, where my grandparents lived, during the Depression, money was hard to come by.
Yeah.
The Democrats went into office, and the Republicans were the Johnsons, the T.D. Neal Mercantile had the post office. My mother and dad decided to be nice if they had the post office for continual income, because there was nothing else here at that time. So they got out and went after the post office. Well, it wound up to be a big old fight between this end of town and that end of town.
But now, is that what started all this east-west division years ago?
That's probably what
Actually,
started it.
I wondered about that.
That and Bitter Creek.
Now, who had the post office? Since it was at the Johnsons, the
That was
Mercantile.
T.D. Neal
Neal's
Mercantile.
Mercantile.
Uh-huh.
And then they wanted the post office.
They had the post office, and my mother and dad wanted it.
Uh-huh.
So they went after it because there was a new regime in office. The Democrats were in office. The Johnsons were Republicans. We were Democrats. And so my mother was appointed that the post office was to be moved the next day into the building behind Red River Inn, the present Red River Inn, where my granddad and grandmother had lived. That's where they're going to have the temporary office for the post office until my dad could get a building built. They got all the fish and moved them in that the day before, and we're going to pick up the papers and documents the next day in the mail, and that night that building was blown off the face of the earth.
I've heard that before. And you
Well,
know,
that was my grandparents' building.
they blew their building off of the face of the earth.
Yeah.
He's got a paper clipping of an article out of the Taos paper.
Just a
Now,
short
that
blurb
was
on
all by accident, of course.
Of course.
Of course.
You know what?
Very, very.
it. I've
Gratitude.
got a picture of some of the people we think were
Whoa.
involved in it.
Whoa.
So what, did they ever get the post office put in someplace else? then?
Yeah, my parents hung in there.
Where J.D. and Renee live.
No.
Wasn't that
No, it's where Wayne
post
Kidd
office?
is, where Wayne Kidd lives now. My mother and dad had a home there and a little store, and then the post office was there.
Oh, but then they did move it eventually to.
Well, the people up here fussed about the post office being that into town, and they wanted more central locations, so that's when they built the building up there where J.D. lives now.
And that became post office.
That became the post office.
So where
19
J.D. lives now, that became a post office.
That became the post office.
Huh.
And that was 19,
34.
no, about 37, I think, when they built that building.
That's right.
We were down at that end of town for a while.
So they wanted it more centrally located. But they had already moved the fixtures and everything to your grandma's house.
Yeah, in those days, the postmaster had to furnish his own fixtures. The
Oh,
government didn't furnish them.
uh-huh.
So, the materials and the furniture and equipment that was in that building were the private property of my mother and dad. When it was blown off the face of the earth, it belonged to them, so there was no federal investigation in those days. This was before Alcohol Farms investigations.
Greta Gallagher told me that story, and she says she knows who did it. She won't
Well,
say.
we know who did it too.
Got a good idea the same day, didn't you?
You not only have a Republican into town and a Democratic into town, you also have a Protestant and a Catholic cemetery.
That's not quite true, but
Boy,
it's
the Red River's always been fighting.
2 zip codes.
And where was the Catholic cemetery at?
it's all
It's
one.
all been, it's
Okay.
all one.
Where was it originally at
On the
though?
hill.
Up on
That's
the
Same
hill.
place?
'Cause
Oh, I see.
That's a misnomer, really, because the graveyard on the hill, my grandmother was a Presbyterian. And she's one of those buried up there. And my granddaddy, Harry, I suppose was a Presbyterian. My daddy, I think he just believed in nature. His mother was a Catholic.
So that's a misnomer.
Yeah, that's just somebody's
Yeah.
figment of somebody's imagination.
Well, Big Joe Phipps is buried up there.
Oh, yeah.
Big Joe Phipps was the daddy of Bert and Little Joe.
Possible.
Now, the fixtures that Bob Prunty has in his building now,
Those are his.
those are his? Those didn't come from your folks' post office?
I think
You know
part
what, the
of it-
window, I think the window did,
Okay.
Chris.
Cause see, when John Wagner took it, he took part of your folks' boxes, and then he had it a year, and then Annie Beth took it, and so some of those.
When she and Tony split and Bob Prunty took over the post office.
That's right.
I think the window in where Bob Prunty's building is the original window my mother bought new.
Okay.
You talking about the window that you used to get
service
your
window.
mail?
Yeah, the service window.
Where you bought your
Read by
little
stand.
stamps and stuff.
But the boxes aren't.
I think
I
some
don't
of
think so, I think the
boxes
boxes are, I think Bob bought those someplace else.
Okay.
Some of them might be some of the old original ones.
I think there are some of them. But he had to add to it because there were so many more people wanting boxes, you
Yeah.
know, that he bought new boxes, but I still think some of the boxes were your mom's from her office.
So Wayne and Marcia Kidd's place where y'all lived had the post office and another business?
A little store,
A little store,
Little
like
grocery store.
like a grocery
a
store.
little grocery store. And then when my mother and dad built the building up here where J.D. lives now,
Mm-hmm.
then my sister and brother-in-law had a bar there, the Wagon Wheel Tavern.
Where?
Marcia.
Wayne and
Where Marcia
Marcia's,
and
they had a
Wayne
little
did.
bar there?
So the statement that I made that sign in the front yard there was referring to the Black Mountain wasn't correct, was it? It
No, it was
referring,
correct.
it was?
It was,
I
Okay.
think it was correct.
That was Black Mountain sign rather than the wagon wheel.
right, because the wagon wheel was across Millette.
Okay. On the
I
other
don't
side.
remember exactly what you said, but I think what you said was probably true, that it was directing people by Pioneer Lodge to the road that went to
Yeah.
Black Mountain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, JD's the one that told me that. He said that's what that sign was pointing at, because I could only
Well, I
read
think that's right.
the little word tavern on it, and I really didn't see the sign
I
well.
think that was
Where'd you
Black
see the
Mountain.
sign?
Oh, in a photo, what was
Oh,
it,
in the
3 weeks
photo?
ago? It was a photo of Cliff,
Clappers.
Horace Johnson's Pioneer Lodge, sitting on the corner with a gas station and pumps.
say?
and Homa Hot Biscuits over there where the video is now.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was that sign that said Tavern. And I
Pointed
had,
this
yeah, and I had said that tavern, it was pointing towards Black Mountain, advertising that as the
And
tavern
that- and
and
that's
dance
right.
I
floor.
think that's right.
Okay.
Because Eileen D had a sign, my sister and brother-in-law, their sign was on the corner, overhung on the corner of that building where Rain and Marshall lived now. It had a wagon wheel, and I
Okay.
think it had neon around it. It was a wagon wheel tavern.
Right on the corner there.
Johnny, did you all know about Cliff's?
No.
Yeah. Marcia doesn't know that.
Poor contraire, Neil.
So there was a wagon wheel there with the neon around it and stuff, and it said
Yeah.
Wagon Wheel Tavern.
Wagon Wheel
And that's
Tavern.
where Marcia and Wayne are.
I think I have a picture someplace.
Goodness gracious. And
That was a
then-
pretty busy little corner.
I'm telling you. And when you're saying pointing toward Black Mountain, are you talking about the post office, I mean the playhouse?
Yeah, yeah.
It would be like
What
if you
was
went
the
behind
button?
Pioneer Lodge now, Jolene, going
Mhm.
this way.
Mm-hmm.
That sign was right there where that yellow cabin is, pointing that way to go to Pioneer Lodge, or to Black Mountain Playhouse,
right.
across the bridge at the river.
Hmm. And what was the Black Mountain Playhouse? What was it?
The dance hall. Mr. Lewis
Okay.
built that as a dance hall about 1937.
Did he ever get a liquor license in it?
Yeah,
Okay.
he had a liquor
Which
license.
Mr. Lewis, Ken
L.S.
Lester and all of
Lewis.
that?
L.S. Lewis was Lester's daddy,
Lester's dad.
and Clifton's daddy. Yeah, we heard about it.
Dance hall.
We heard about Clifton from Brandenburg.
Hmm.
They used to have a little
Yesterday?
orchestra
day
from
before
Cuesta
yesterday.
called the Cuesta Bluebirds.
That's
They come up and play.
What kind of instruments did they play?
Everything.
Little-
He's
Horns,
been dead for
drums,
3
piano.
weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, it
couldn't
was the
believe it.
Gonzalez family.
Grapevine is family.
Lily's family,
Lester sure
her
didn't
brothers
tell
and
us
all
that.
of them.
The Mountain Bluebirds. Was that it? The Mountain Bluebirds?
The
Or
Cuesta
Cuesta?
Bluebirds.
Cuesta Bluebirds.
Cuesta Bluebirds.
Oh, you talk about the Black Mountain Playhouse?
Mhm.
The upper floor, it was 2 floors, it was 2 levels.
Hmm.
And the first level was the bar and gambling. Then you went up the stairs, and the upper stairs was dancing. And they had blue lights, and they had blue lights, white lights. When the slow music would come on, they'd turn on the blue light and
Mhm.
turn off the white light.
Now, I was told that Lewis built that because he got into a feud with Tony Simeon, Tony Sr. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
He just built it because he wanted to go in competition, make some money,
I think he just built it because he could see there was
market for it, yeah.
a market for it. And gambling was wide open
Uh-huh.
for it at that
Yeah,
time.
then. The blue lights was slow dancing or fast dancing?
Slow dancing.
Slow dancing.
When they turned them into wolf and them waltzes. Blue skirt waltz.
Is that the second floor where the golf thing is up there now? At the Black Mountain, or has that all been remodeled since then?
You know, it's been remodeled, but I think the floors are still split. When you go in the front door of Black Mountain, if you turn to the right and go back down to
Mhm.
whatever's down below,
Mhm.
you go downstairs.
Right.
That was where the bar was located down there.
It was a bowling alley.
Became a bowling alley.
And then later became a bowling alley, that's right.
And then the dance floor is where the roller rink is now?
Yeah. Yeah, and that was all dance floor.
It was a split one.
Pretty good size.
Okay.
It was
Very
big,
good
even
size.
bigger than it is now, I think.
And
Really?
Mr. Lewis decided if they could do business up here with Western bands, that he'd get name bands in too. So he got some big name band in with all the silk jackets and bow ties, and nobody would go. They want a hillbilly band.
Two-step station, huh?
Yeah, Western.
That's what it
They want a
sounded
Western
like.
band. Yeah.
Hmm.
So and Mr. Lewis's, the bartender was Hogan, Harold Hogan, I think, would have been Lester's uncle.
When did Black Mountain become a pool table kind of a place?
After the war, as I recall.
That's when they gave up the bar and the whole thing?
I think so. After World War II.
How did World War II affect this valley? I've heard the story that they didn't know Pearl Harbor had been bombed for 3 weeks because of the snow. And somebody said, no, the pass was closed and they couldn't get down the road. I said, okay. Nobody had radios, right? Okay.
There were radios, and there were telephones. Only 1 or 2 telephones. But we knew because I was in California, I was in Los Angeles when Pearl Harbor was bombed, and I was in correspondence with folks all the time. And how it affected the town. Business was good here during the war because gasoline was rationed and they couldn't go to Yosemite or Yellowstone, so they came here. So
Okay.
business was good during the war. It was real good. Then after the war it tapered off And then when they closed gambling, it really tapered off.
I bet.
But when people could get gas, then they started going to Yosemite and Yellowstone and Canada and Colorado and different places, and business kind of slacked off for a while.
Now, was there a casino in Eagle Nest?
Yeah.
Was the Laguna the casino, or was it that Eagle Nest Lodge that's out there on the curve up the mountain?
That was, they had gambling there and they had liquor at that old Eagle Nest Lodge, and right there in town where Laguna Vista Lodge is, there was liquor there and they had gambling.
Well, and
Across
up the street, where Julio's is now.
Johnny Fincher.
Well, and before Johnny Fincher, you know, the gamblers were over there.
Eagle Nest Inn.
Eagle Nest Inn.
It had gambling and liquor. The Gold Pan. The Gold Pan was run by the guy from, what was that man's name? A real dapper gentleman.
Wilson, Gene Wilson.
Gene Wilson had the Gold Pan. And it was real, he built that and it was real fancy and it burned just shortly after it was built. Then they
Jolene,
rebuilt it.
excuse me, Tom.
Go ahead.
Oh, have you mentioned the Romer's place that, yeah, or
No, we haven't gotten to that one.
We haven't got around the corner.
Or Aunt Becky yet? We haven't got up to Aunt Becky's.
You know, yes, because
Did you?
Aunt Becky, did she live? Because I heard about her, read about her.
I tried to find that spring back here, but Harvey told me it had been gone for a long time. And I wasn't sure I was in the right spot anyway. I was up on that hill back there behind where George Warndell owns now, and that up and through there. Was that where she was at?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you're right there, that's a street where you go into Georgie Warndell's like, he's on High Street.
Uh-huh.
Lazy Bear's here, Georgie's here. The street that goes through here is Jayhawk Trail. And on Jayhawk Trail, when you go on Jayhawk Trail, if you, on that street right at the end of it was where Aunt Becky was. Her cabin's right there.
Okay, so there's a big house there right now, isn't there? Pretty good sized place.
Yeah, that has an arched doorway in it.
Uh-huh.
That's
That's
her,
the spot.
Her house would have been down in front of those places.
Okay.
I've got a picture of it.
I've seen some in magazines and books rather, that with all the flowers and
Yeah.
everything, the
They said she
vines
was-
and
They said she was known for her flowers, and she wallpapered the wall with pictures of birds and children, and
Yeah,
she out of the
covers off,
magazine, I guess, huh?
well, and covers off like the Saturday Evening Post and Collier's and different magazines.
And
I'll
our
have to
kids
see
loved to play up there. Of course, Aunt Becky was dead, but they used to love to go up there. And I've got a little granite coffee pot that was Aunt Becky's that Pam brought home one time when she was just a little old girl. But they used to play up around there.
And her house was still there then.
Uh-huh.
See, they didn't tear the house down until Siders bought that property.
I think that's about the time it was tore down, honey. Yeah.
Oh, well, how long ago was that? Maybe it was here and I didn't know it, huh? Mm-hmm.
Those cabins were there
Is that right?
they were there just a couple years ago.
A couple, but
Is that the one that they had this big sign on the side of it there? Right in back where the Addison, well, it's Warndell's now. His lot is there where he has all his machinery and everything.
Uh-huh.
There was a big house there, and they had a sign on the side of it. They were trying to sell it, and they fourplexed it.
Oh,
that was
Rebels?
Revels.
Oh, okay. That wasn't it.
Aunt Becky's was an old log place. It was, and it had a real low ceiling.
had a porch on it too, didn't it? A little porch,
A stoop,
stoop.
I think. Oh, she had a screened-in porch on her own home. She had a screened-in porch. She sat out there a lot in a rocking chair, and that's where she had a lot of things from Collier and Saturday Evening Post. And she loved children, and she'd have taffy pulls for all the kids in town, and we'd go up there and pull taffy and have candy, and she'd tell little stories, and she could go like two cats fighting with her mouth, like two cats were fighting. You'd think it's a big old cat fight someplace. That's Becky doing it. And she had a little story. She'd ask, he says, "What do you do when you wear your shoes out?" And the kids would say, "Well, I get new ones." She said, "I wear mine back in." She was a nice little lady. And her nephew still lives or was living in Trinidad. He worked for the Postal Department. Armstrong.
Roy.
Was it Roy?
Roy.
Armstrong. And then the girl, her niece lived in Albuquerque, last I heard. Can't think of her name. The grandson of Aunt Becky was a great fly fisherman. He was a really good fisherman.
who was that?
And Becky's grandson,
Mm-hmm.
Armstrong, he loved to fly fish.
Let's see what other building. Walking down this way, let's see, go past the Load. Of course, the Bull of the Woods, and there's always been this terrific rivalry, even today there is, but there was rivalry years ago, wasn't there?
There's
between-
always been rivalry.
Always.
So did Danzana build that?
Danzani built that.
What did he call it when he first built it?
Silver spruce.
Silver spruce, okay.
Silver spruce barn.
Did he do that to spite Tony, or just because he saw that there
No,
was
he just saw an opportunity.
like to do
He
it?
was living in Taos. He was a craftsman. He was an excellent carpenter. And he did a lot of work on the La Fonda in Taos, and he was looking for something and just showed up.
And what year did he build that?
37.
Okay.
Wow, a lot of things happened in 1937, didn't it? Must have been a boom year.
Well, it was coming out of the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
People were getting money to spend again.
Feeling better.
Feeling better
Wonder if
about
we're
it.
going to have that happen again.
I hope.
I keep hoping. We're just like those prospectors.
That's right. But it was a lot of fun because we used to run back and forth, and the kids, we could all go to the bar. Well, that's all there was to do. That was even before community house.
Mm-hmm.
We'd go back and forth and just had glorious time. Each place had a band, and you'd dance over here a while, and then you'd go back over.
They still
Tony's.
do that. They still do that.
The gamblers and the bartender knew that if they kept the kids happy, the mom and daddy would stick around.
Mm-hmm.
And so they used to throw picnics for us kids. And we'd have big weenie roasts, marshmallow roasts, and the musicians would come to the bar and play for us. And we had big time.
The musicians played till 2 o'clock, and then the
And we'd go have a picnic.
gamblers furnished all the food and everything, and we used to go up Pioneer and build a campfire, and we'd roast weenies and just have a great time.
After
till-
2 in the morning?
After 2 in the morning.
After 2 in the morning?
Yeah.
Kids, little kids?
Oh, we
Oh, not little
were
kids, no, we were
17, 18 years
we
old.
were teenagers.
You were having woodsies like they call them now.
yeah, but we didn't have any
Wootsies.
booze. But we had lots of pop and beer and
Well, that was 37, 38, 39.
40 and 41
40.
and 42.
When did Tony own the property that Danzana built on, or did Danzana own the property as well?
Danzana owned their property.
Okay.
And he probably bought it from Long John Dunn.
Oh, really?
No, fooling.
He probably bought it.
Long John Dunn owned this property?
Well, Long John Dunn was an old crook that bought land for taxes. And he owned a lot of property in Red River that he
Is
picked
that
up for
right?
taxes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And crooked as he was tall.
He was an old
I've
scoundrel.
heard.
Earl Womer told me about his place for taxes.
I bought the property where Georgie Ward owns for taxes. That 12 lots. Buggy Smith and I bought it for taxes.
Which 12 lots are those?
Where Willie Sampson and Georgia Wendell have their property there, that half block.
Mm-hmm.
I bought that for taxes,
Well, we don't.
my friend and I.
Was Manby ever up here?
If he was, he didn't stay. He might have come just on a visit.
He lost his head.
You're
Say he
bad.
wasn't dead.
Bad, John. It's bad.
Take his hand home.
He lost his head.
Bad.
Well, that's interesting.
I heard the dogs ate it.
I
Is
did
that,
too.
is that what that was?
I heard
Johnny's
that too.
mom told about when she
Cow smell.
first came out in this part of the country before she and Pop were married. She had a sister that lived in Taos, Russell. And of course, Manby, they were all Catholics. And of course, the Catholics were great for card parties, for raising money.
Bazaars.
Bazaars and things like that. But they used to, this woman that he lived with, forget what they call her now.
Pussy?
No, the Mexican woman. Teresina. But she would have the card parties there, and where the stables is now was his home, of course.
Mhm.
And she said she remembered being there many a time at the card parties.
Okay.
Said it was a beautiful, beautiful home. Had hardwood floors.
I love that story.
Mhm.
Is the old this hospital that we call the hospital that isn't, is it haunted? People keep saying that.
Oh, no. You mean,
I mean, I'm saying, do you hear any? I have heard stories. One of my sons lived there and it scared him to death. He had something happen that scared him, and another
in
kid
the old
lived-
convent place behind the hospital?
Right, this old.
Oh,
our
this
old
one up
hospital.
here. Oh, no.
There, and another kid living there just got scared to death. Just scared, so I thought,
Maybe they had a really good imagination.
must have had a good one. Scared them though. Let's see, what else? Coming down this way, like the Redwood, is there anything, or the Star? Is there anything in particular about that?
Oh, the Star used to be Frank and Dottie Lane's old garage.
It was what?
That's right. Where the Star is now,
Huh?
Rosemary would say that was Frank Lane and Dottie Lane's garage. He sold gasoline and repaired automobiles.
And they had a little bitty house right next door to it.
Mhm.
And that little house is moved up right next to the Catholic Church up there.
Silverbell Trail,
Yeah. And is that the one the Allens have, honey?
not Allen.
From Texas.
Yeah.
Did they remodel that?
But it's not Allen.
Lynch.
Lynch. EAV.
Mhm.
Marie.
So there was a little house next door to it?
To the Star.
Mr. Lynch, he's
Where
a
was it next door to
real,
the
he
Star?
had real
Honey,
white
it was
hair.
right
Yeah.
next door.
Yeah.
'cause
Before they'd
the main-
added on?
Yeah.
Okay.
The main building was just a garage.
Hmm.
Just a garage.
Made out of Quaker boats.
And then
Made out of what?
Quaker from logs.
Oh my God.
Then the little house was just right next door.
Mhm.
And then when Chambers bought it and made it into the Star, well, then they took that little cabin out, and then they added all that front onto it there,
Mhm.
where the little cabin was.
So actually, this all sat back, kind of. The garage sat back and the house sat back.
No,
wasn't
it's right where it
close.
is.
It was just
No.
right there. Right
The
on
little
street.
house sat back a little ways, but then they filled all that into the front where the curio
So it was
part
like
is.
they fixed cars and
Yeah.
sold gasoline.
And all the kids, all the boys in town hung out down there. Yeah, because there was a garage and they were all interested.
The building that was
Mhm.
really nice in Edelweiss eventually moved to Angelina's.
Yeah, it was Don Carmichael, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now what
Well,
happened?
Bowen claims that Carmichael sold it, stole it from him.
Oh, yeah.
Bowen had a lot of stuff stolen.
Yeah, he sure did.
But it was over there where the Edelweiss is, and they moved it over to Angelina's,
And what was that? What was at the Edelweiss?
this old building.
An old building, and they moved it.
To where
It was a repair
Angelina's
shop.
And that is Angelina's today, except redone and redone and
And
redone.
redone.
It used to be a
Redone.
filling station.
Mhm.
That's right.
It was a Texas station,
And
wasn't it?
Harry Robb run it for a long time.
Yeah.
Right. It was still there.
We
when
literally
we-
made a silver
First
purse out of the cells here.
There really,
Yeah.
there's been a lot of that.
It could be done, John.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the Silver Spruce Bar became Kate and Gary's, or was there something in between that?
Mac McCormick.
Mac
Mac McCormick had
You
two
know,
big police
a lot-
dogs.
The doggone saloon, is that what it
doggone.
is?
Yeah. And they Don had two big old police dogs. And those damn dogs would growl at customers and jump up on the bar and radio building it. And when Mac sold that bar and left, they had a contest to name the bar a new name. And
Jimmy Van Alstyne.
Jim Van Ox came up with the name, the Doggone Saloon, when the dogs were gone.
Well, and then when Dickinson's bought Tony's old place.
He called, that's right, Mac called it Mac's Bar.
That's right.
When Mac had it, it
So
was
when Mac
Mac's
had it,
Bar.
it was Mac's Bar,
Uh-huh.
and then it became the Doggone Saloon because they
Right.
got rid of the dogs. And
Yeah.
then after that,
When Dickinson's bought Tony's place, then they had a name search
Contest.
going on then.
Oh,
Van
gosh,
Alstyne named that DeBardee. And it was the DeBardee, Dick and Donna.
I forgot that they
Dick
had
and
that.
Donna.
Oh my God.
so first it was Tilly's and
Tony's.
Tilly's and Tony's is all it was called, Tilly's
Yeah.
and Tony's. And then it was the DeBardee after that.
Yeah, until he sold to Dick and Donna.
And then after that,
It was the,
Mother lode, wasn't it, after that?
and then the mother
I think
lode.
it probably was a mother load.
It's been the mother lode for a long time then.
Just sold a
Yeah.
Texas fruit bar.
And
I
then
think that's right.
from Silver Spruce Bar to Max Bar to Doggone Saloon
Kate and
to
Gary's.
To Kate.
to Kate and Gary's and to present.
Do you
So,
remember when Van Austin's had the little restaurant called the In-Between?
Where was
Where
that?
the Redwood is now?
Oh, the
that's
Redwood?
right, uh-huh.
Then they used to have a little chicken shack up there behind.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Right behind where Pat's
It's
store
right there where, the
Caracol,
Carcamos.
Carcamos.
uh-huh.
What was there?
It was a chicken,
Chicken shack.
they called it,
Chicken shack.
is that what they call it, chicken
think it's
shack?
What was it, for chickens or you ate there?
No, you ate there, you went and got it like
Chicken to go. so-
Chicken to go.
Maybe that's what they call
Maybe
it, chicken to go or something.
That sounds right, Judy.
But the Redwood was called what?
In between.
In between.
in between.
And that was like that a long time? It's called?
Well,
Not
there
a
was-
long time
how many
because,
changes?
That and
Ron
the
and
part,
Nat had
they
it.
actually
Oh.
built that place, and Nat had a little boutique, believe it.
There was a
Before
boutique.
she-
Yeah, I've heard
Before
that.
the restaurant, why it was even there, she had her little boutique. That was the first thing she had there.
And then they put the restaurant.
And then they made the
So
restaurant.
it was first a boutique?
Mhm.
Very first?
First it was a Siesta Lodge and John and Rosie had it.
Oh. Those people.
And there was a
First
grocery-
it was the Siesta
and a
Lodge?
grocery
Yeah.
store.
What's up?
And a grocery store.
Did y'all build
Yeah.
it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Don't-
We started that before we were married.
Is that right?
While I was still in the service.
Siesta Lodge, and then it was a
And then-
lodge, and then what, the Redwood, was it not a restaurant? It was just, it was part
No,
of the
that
That
lodge?
was the lobby.
That was
That
the
was the
lobby
lobby.
of the Siesta.
And then we built a new house, the house back there in the back.
Mm-hmm.
We built that house in 1947.
Oh, you should have seen that house, Joey. It was the cutest thing. Rosie just had that. It was precious.
Was it back
And-
of the lobby part, or that
No,
house?
back in the
It
back.
was
that
it's in
house
the
back there.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Back in the back.
And then we sold that to the Stevensons, and then Johnny built the store, what is it called now?
The Red Dog?
Red
The
Dog.
Red Dog.
Red Dog.
That was our grocery store. And our home
You
was
didn't
on
have
the
your red
back.
dog back then?
No,
On the back of
I had
that?
a couple yellow dogs.
What year was that?
I opened that store, I built that store in 1952. Opened it in 53.
You
Sold it
built,
in 64.
which one? The Red
It's where the
Dog?
Red Dog.
Where the Red Dog is, that was our store.
And
We had
you
the store
built
and the
it in
lodge.
when?
52 I started it.
52.
Opened it in Memorial Day 1953.
The Redwood Cafe wasn't anything then, was it?
That was the lobby.
That was the
That
That
lobby.
was the lobby for our lodge
Okay.
Interesting. The Siesta Lodge
and a big deck.
and the big deck. Okay, and then,
sold
from
the-
that, it was Nat Cochran's?
No, we sold the Spillers.
The
To Donald
Spillers.
Stevenson.
Oh, Mike Stevenson was it. And we sold to
Okay.
Mike Stevenson,
Mm-hmm.
and they kept it Siesta. And then Mike got killed,
Hmm.
and his widow married Wes Spiller. Did they keep Siesta Lodge?
They kept it, they operated it for about 5 years, I mean,
Hmm.
Yes, Siesta.
before they sold it. Then they sold it to, Siggy and Martha.
To
Or Ron
Ziggy
and
and
Martha
Martha?
run it for a while, and then when they got rid of it, Ron and Nat took it over.
I forgot.
And then Ron and Nat sold it to the fella that was the accountant, he moved here,
Oh, yeah,
but he didn't last very long, just about a year.
yeah.
Then, after the accountant sold it, oh, God,
I can't remember.
Boy, it's gone a lot of changes,
it's
huh?
gone a lot of changes,
The kids that have them now, they've had it longer than anybody.
anybody.
They've had it
It's
longer
like
than
a
anybody.
lazy miner.
Mike Stevenson built all the
They
new
used to
units
call it
on
the
this
wee
west side.
people.
He built all those new
He
units.
did? He built all those there, huh?
But I can't remember who did it after that accountant.
After Jack Emery sold it, the next owner run it a while and sell it, and then each owner would pay the previous owner, would pay the previous.
Some things just don't change, do they?
Musical chairs, John.
So the accountant, and then after that, you don't remember, somehow, and then Redwood became after that. 'Cause
Yeah.
Redwood was here when we came. I
Well,
think they'd
and,
been here a year before.
And see, Jimmy Van Austin had it.
Huh.
That's when he called it the in-between.
Yeah, that's right.
And he may have bought it from the accountant.
Well, weren't Rawls, not Rawls.
In between.
When was,
Weren't Sauls there for a while?
Big Mike was in there for a while.
But the in-between
Oh
was a
gosh, you're right.
restaurant.
Big
You're
Mike
right.
was in there.
That's
remember
right.
Yeah,
that?
Big Mike was in there.
That's right.
They go back
They had a
from
pizza
liberal
shop.
Kansas.
Because Ellen worked
Didn't he?
for, and Laverne was working there, and that's when.
Well, that,
They
but
fell
that was
in.
our grocery store. That wasn't our old,
Oh.
that wasn't our old
That's right.
Siesta Lodge.
That's right.
They had that cheese thing there in our store,
Oh.
remember?
Well, Ellen worked in an ice cream parlor or something.
That was after the Calhoun sold our store.
We sold a cow.
Okay, because that's right, Beth and Ted had that, didn't they?
Well, it was Glenn.
It was
Glenn
what?
Superette.
Glenn?
Superette was there
Bitter
first.
Creek.
You saying Lynn or Glenn?
Glenn.
Glenn
Glenn
Calhoun.
But
Okay.
see, Glenn wasn't in our store. He put the one in where Peterson is now.
Yes,
He
we
owned that
vacationed up here and we
We
went
sold
in
it.
there, I remember that.
Yeah, he bought it though, didn't he?
Yeah, Ted, or Glenn bought it.
For Ted.
You know, I had forgot about that, that was a grocery store.
And then they were there, what, 5, 6 years, I think.
So where did High Street make the turn and come down and become Main Street back then?
Right where the Star is. High Street,
Yeah,
right where it is.
okay.
The Star, the road cut across and went, right where the community house is.
Uh-huh.
The road would have went right about through that back part of the community house. That's where the road went. And would come out there where the Browns had their photo shop. Would come out right in there.
How long was it before it extended all the way through?
Main Street was paved?
We had our grocery store when they dug out the front of putting Main Street.
Oh, you talking about Main Street, I was thinking High Street.
No, I was talking about High Street. Yeah.
When did they go, when they,
Did High Street go all the way through?
Yes.
Okay, because that picture I had a couple weeks ago with the wagon turning, the one you sent me with
there
all
was
the
no
cars,
bridge, there was no bridge.
no bridge there.
So they had to go down, and where I told you where the footbridge was,
Uh-huh.
there's a car there. That car was going east, and the wagon was going to make that turn and go down there and go ford the creek there at Bitter Creek. Up here where Chris Peterson has his shop now,
Mhm.
you couldn't get across there in those days. And every spring when the water would get high, the river would change its path. Really did.
I can tell from the early photos, it was pretty wide at one spot too. wasn't it?
Real wide.
Real, because that picture I had of the little schoolhouse and the hotel back there, show a real wide, real wide. Bitter Creek running through there.
You know, I think what happened partly, since the Forest Service has allowed people to take material out up there for the roadway and one thing and another, they've taken all that material out and it's lowered the water table and made this land down here usable, where it used to be boggy. This used to be a bog right here.
But
Yeah.
there's a place
Yeah.
where all that gravel to drop its load too.
Yeah.
Well, where the park is was all boggy.
Yeah.
Just,
Oh, no kidding.
Oh, yeah, it was all
yes,
boggy.
all
Well,
boggy.
that-
Full of
Where our
blackbirds.
store is all done.
There was a big spring there, and my granddad was a just a piece of the Indians going from Raid Hill, and their sentence was to work on that ditch, and that ditch went down from behind your store, down and came out off where Big Chief is now, a drainage ditch for the swamp.
Where Big Chief was.
Well, where
St.
St. Bernard is,
Yeah, I remember Big Chief.
that was Les Lewis's.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where the ditch came
Well,
out, drainage
started out
ditch.
as
And
Bolton,
that's-
Mr. Bolton.
Because I read about that ditch and they said that if they got in, well, they was talking about one particular Indian that had been jailed and he escaped and they made him dig a ditch. Is that it?
Yeah,
That's probably one of them.
And so, and they said the ditch was still visible today?
It was before,
Oh, this book was written.
before Ponderosa and all that was built, and right around that ditch,
Okay.
it was, you could see it very plainly, it worked. It
was
worked, it drained
behind Miller's
water out.
Crossing. There was a
Well-
spring.
When we built our,
Big spring behind, right
Still
behind
Well,
us.
they're
back there.
still right
Is it
in
still?
the Ponderosa, right
Really?
there in
They
the
tried and tried
Ponderosa.
to drain that and it just keeps coming.
Where
Big
is it?
spring.
In the back.
In the back?
Oh, on the west back corner.
Well, and underneath
It's
our,
still going.
our little siesta lodge, remember
We had a spring.
we had a spring under.
That's where we got our water this first year.
That's right.
I've heard tales about the horses lost in the bog and stuff.
Oh,
People
yeah.
couldn't
Really?
get their mule out, it'd get caught in there and just, that was it.
Cows too, I watched cows over by the jump jack by Red River have their calves in the spring out there where they get out there and couldn't get out. And they had their calves right there in the mud. And then, of course, they eventually were rescued. They'd get them out, but it was awful hard to get them out.
Ooh, I bet. I'm gonna say goodnight, everybody.
Have you had old funds you could stand,
I
Judy?
will, yeah.
No,
Are you
it was
hungry
fine.
or did you eat?
Oh, yeah, I ate.
If we ever had an
We probably
earthquake,
need to put you to bed too,
if
baby.
you ever had an earthquake, this would probably be the only building left standing.
Yeah.
That's
right.
Look out the water in the basement. I bet it looked like this, John. There were wrong numbers.
I learned
Leaning
something
tower
like
up there.
Rosie, I think
This
we are gonna
valley's
have
a
to get in
little
the car
silver
and
lake,
tootle
yeah.
down the street.
Oh,
I think
I'm happy to go with you.
Good
John.
idea.
Really are.
Really, it's, because, you know,
They went
trying
to
to
bedrock
think,
this
and you get off
Drive
on a
highways
tangent.
down the-
Yeah.
But when you go, and so many of the places have changed,
Oh,
Yeah.
and ownerships and so forth, so.
Yeah.
Expensive.
And
but-
things that were here a long
Well,
time ago
don't
that
everybody
have been
leave just
removed,
'cause I
and maybe
have to
something
go.
else built there.
And
I
then-
think that would be a good
That would be a good deal.
way to go about it.
Mhm.
Well, this
Okay.
was really
That's what we're
interesting.
gonna do.
I heard things I hadn't
Yeah,
heard.
things I didn't know.
So much of the history of this town is so
It's
convoluted.
neat.
You know, you've heard like the mail not, and
I'd like to
the
get
news about
every
Pearl Harbor
year
not
kinda
getting it,
add
things like
something
that,
like
that, you know,
do,
they're,
walk through and then
those folk tales
take
get started
another
somewhere.
tour.
People like the sound of them and
Some
went,
people
yeah, let's
can't
keep
walk.
telling
They
that.
think it's all
Well, you hear it at a
Yeah.
bar, some of you think it's a big.
You go along.
And that's the
with
last
it,
place
and
you
the
want to be
other
going for
place.
truth.
There's so much.
Apparently, the
Sort of like the
Jeep
Jeep
drivers
drivers.
used to
Yeah.
really, truly make stuff
Instead of
up.
just
Oh,
having
yeah,
one
they
big-
still do.
Still
Ivor.
do.
The one about Ed Ivor that was lost in
And then
Avalanche.
we were talking about.
I hadn't heard that one.
In the Upper Valley.
yeah, Jeep
Upper
drivers.
Valley.
How
Made
they
up
just
this
make
big
up
story about
these-
Ed
It's
Ivor.
rescue and Molly B. Minham.
And see, John is so familiar with all that up there because they lived up there.
Ed Ivor was just Red
Red
River,
River,
not the
without
R.
the R.
Ah.
There was a pin, there was a pin that had a big R that kind of, but you really
And then
couldn't.
they
Tony
said,
Wernthal designed it,
Millette,
and it had a
down at River
expression
Ridge,
R that was created by
the
two
Millette
scooters.
cabin is
And
there.
then it went
Yes.
E and I.
It's the
Everybody's
big old
always
cabin
asking
that
who's
sits
Ed
there.
Ivor.
So that's where you got the trail up
Or in
there.
the
Yeah.
Okay, I wondered about that one time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, Tony Wernthal
And see,
was up
Johnny's
there,
got a
and
picture
nobody
of that.
ever- they
And
never
His
saw
then
dad-
that.
I guess
His
the
dad's
Jeep
sister
drivers.
with some of the
just
Millette
embellished
children
that.
when they were little.
Murphy's got some good.
Between Jeep drivers and fish stories, I would imagine there's a lot of creative
But in
room.
front
You'd
of
go
that-
to the
that
coffee
big old
bar
log building
and
that's
start a
down-
rumor, and it would be
And see, that was
truth,
the original home.
you
Then
know,
there's another one.
before the day
see,
was over.
there behind
That's still
the
true.
Hop Country.
That still
Yeah.
happens.
I used to
I,
do that when I was
That's,
mayor.
There was a Millette thing behind
The
here.
last one I
that
ever
was
started
that
was we were gonna install
Millette
snowmaking
That
on
was
High
that.
Street for the snowmobilers.
And then other Millette.
That makes you too
three
popular,
of them.
John.
And the other one was
I got
that
real
Johnny
good
was
response
talking
to our
about where
April
they
Fool.
went up Broad
Did you?
Canyon.
The giant dome going over the town.
That was a Millette?
I had people
Way
going,
back
well, we turned to
up
page
in Bobcat.
13, but we didn't
Yeah.
have one. I guess
Go
it fell
up-
off.
When you go up Bobcat Pass.
No, it
Yeah.
didn't,
You
but
start over the top,
Yeah.
back.
they thought it was for sure. Somebody going, what an adventurous thing.
Well, you're going.
First thing John Tillery said
You're on
was,
the left.
all the environmentalists are
On
going
the
to follow me
left?
on the
Oh,
phone.
yeah, in that valley?
Yeah,
In that
where you
valley?
go around that little hill. and
Well, it
that's
said
where
right there on the
these
side of it too, on what,
home was.
right
They had
under
a
it,
lot of
next
cows.
to it, it said,
There
you know,
was
is this an April
all
Fool
these
joke?
log buildings
And
back
there
in
were people
there.
didn't see
From the
that.
left.
And,
Put two and two together.
yeah, there
We got
was
a big
the
dome
big
coming.
boys. And there was one down
I
here.
know.
We got
There
your
was
time.
Bob Price
Yeah.
and then the one
Yeah.
up Bobcat.
Yeah.
So
We didn't
that
get
one
papers
has
this
always
week.
seemed to have
Thank
all
you.
We
kinds,
didn't
or
get our
did you
time.
move it there?
no,
It hadn't
it's
got
been-
out yet. I got it stumbled.
No, it's been.
I
Probably have some in the car, though.
Johnny's
Yeah, I
got
got
some more
some,
pictures
I got some
of
in the
that.
car, I'll get you
Well,
one.
hand deliver
Where
it.
you can see it.
Person hand delivered.
I'd like to get a paper boy to sell this
So
summer,
see,
but
that would
You know, that would be
another
nice.
Yes,
I'm
it would.
gonna find some kid silly enough to go, yeah, I'll sell those for a dime a
Just
copy or a
wondering,
nickel a
wonder if
copy.
it would be good to get,
Paper boy, that's a
Y'all.
paper person.
No, you'll only find a paper boy dumb enough to do that.
who
A
else
paper
would be
woman,
good?
no, she wouldn't do that, you know.
Should I do it separately?
I
Can
would
we
do it,
all at
I would
once?
do it separately.
Separately would be
I really
better.
would. And of course, as far as Winnie, now she knows where her part of the
That-
country more.
Down there,
Yes,
at that end.
yeah.
Okay.
But, as far as being down in the main part of town, because she and Walter didn't come back till 37.
They just came back for the good time.
Sure.
I already know that's a good
Yeah, I would like to
time.
have done this when Tony Simeon was still living,
Oh, yeah.
before he got so
Oh, I tell you.
far into it.
You know, I
We had a lot of
kind of,
good
I was
sales.
telling that lady, I said, he was a real pill, but I really miss seeing him because I said, this wasn't all that long ago. He'd get in his Jeep, he'd be a beer can in his hand, and just drive right down.
I tell you, some of the funnest times of our lives been with Junior and Betty.
First time.
We've
I
had some
tell
fun times.
you, I kind of miss seeing him. And Bobby said after, after we moved across the street one day, Tony came across the street, sat down on the porch, and he and Bobby had a conversation. He came in, he says, I had a conversation with Tony.
Yo, he could.
Caught him off guard. There you go. Thank you, Fritz.
It's just too bad the old blues got to him.
This week, but we
Yeah.
had to blow it up so big. Oh, the old
Yeah.
Edison mine.
That can sure do it.
Oh.
That's where I found out about his gold extract process.
Yeah.
that
We
didn't
didn't get a
work.
miner this week.
You got one right
Oh,
now.
I got one.
See, the problem is, when I have to mail them out, I have a tendency to think I've already done it, and then I look around and I just thought I took it down there and did it.
Thank
We're
you.
gonna do it again. We're
It's
gonna
not my
keep-
strength,
we're gonna
I guess.
Keep digging.
Oh, that's good. And the
Big.
more you
Yeah,
talk,
but it
the
was
more
originally
you
labeled as a
remember.
Memphis mine, and I said, I don't think it's a
No, it's
Memphis
dead
mine.
mine.
So I went asking around, and, yeah.
It was kind of.
Well, it was this lumber back here, it was
We
tip off
talked
for me,
to
because that's
him,
still
that
kind of
guy's
there.
name,
You
Jack.
can still see those,
What was that
whatever
name?
those beams
Well,
were.
and
I
that,
know
you
Gerald.
see this in the
Jerry,
spring,
is
you
that
go
it?
down through.
Uh-huh.
He's in
And then
town.
the stagecoach
House
road comes
news.
up over here
House
on
news.
this side.
Yeah.
Yeah, now
Yeah.
see, he's
Yeah.
the son of Cleo.
So I got
Yeah,
it
one of
straightened
the
out.
Lives here.
Yeah, he
Did
was
the
on
research
the
on
lot and then
Edison,
busted it
Edison
one night.
group.
His dad was
Yes, they tried to
frantically
open
carrying
about
Oh,
19.
silver
And I
dollars.
remember
35,
him.
36,
when he was
37,
like-
long as
Yeah,
And
His
they,
brother
the
and
men
his
walking
sister.
back and forth.
He seemed like he
And with
probably was real
animals.
ornery too.
The
I don't know.
snowpack
they
up there,
were.
they didn't clear the snow, they just
He had a
kept
beautiful,
walking the
his
same
mom was
path.
beautiful.
And before
She
spring
was
came, they were
rat
just like walking on paths this
She's
deep on a
Indian.
horse to get off the
Yes,
path. Had
that's
a hell of a time getting back out.
His mom
back
is
up on the
Indian.
trail.
So they mined all through the winter?
But she
They
was
mined all
a
through the winter.
beautiful, well, still
And
is.
there was a kid,
Just a beautiful person.
but one of the cabins up there where Jay Lee lives,
And,
was built by the
I think
veterans
all
before
over
and
Elson Barrel.
and Donald.
Oh, yeah.
His mother and dad.
Sundance.
talked
Sundance,
about it one spring.
Because we
And
stayed
he and I
there.
walked to the
when it
Memphis
was the
Edison mine to
Elsinburg.
spend the
That was
night
our
with the
first
miners.
place we ever
And we
did.
went
John
to
and
the
Nell
night with the
Wagner.
miners.
And
And
the
one of them
young
was
man
Little
came
Walter
to the door
Chen.
that night. I bet that
And
was the young
blowing
man
the
that
sun
was
up, he
killed.
let out a yell.
We
And
just,
everybody
Yeah,
to
the one that took his
to
own
the
life.
bath. And the bath was a.
It was a brother-in-law.
meant
Yeah.
oh,
one of the
really?
king
Was
from
brother-in-law?
town.
Wasn't their
Of
son?
Jerry.
I thought
And
their
most men
son
out
was
there-
the one that was,
They'd like
killed
to
in
take a
that
bath of
accident.
water.
Are you thinking
Get
of
rid
John
the
and
heat.
Nell?
29
His
years
son.
old.
Yeah.
they killed
Didn't
in
do
the
that? I
accident.
don't blame you.
Yeah, when I see it,
Waltzes.
You didn't want to get awake that
Oh, well, that
night.
was,
did you? Or
that was
clean,
John
or-
And then we
Wagner,
walked
but
back down,
his
we walked
third
back
wife,
down Bitter Creek.
Ressaway.
Oh.
And-
Trail,
and
going back down
Clyde
to Bitter
Ray
Creek with Tucker.
was her son,
And from
my
the left
first
to the
marriage,
left
and
till
he
they had
wasn't
used
quite
and
right.
kept it
Oh,
packed.
really?
And
Snow,
then he got
and we had a break trail going down
17,
through Bitter
18
Creek
years
like
old.
that.
See,
Now,
John
where
was
did the
so
Millette Trail go in at?
good
Is
to
it,
him.
is there any piece of that still
But
left?
he let him drive.
Which one
and
is
then
it?
I asked the kid, was it comfortable?
Is it
to drive?
That's the governor.
And he got driving.
up through that area there? Okay,
And he ran into that.
fascinating to
A few
me.
years ago,
And
someone was telling me about an old stagecoach road that was
And it was Steve Waltz's brother and that young man
Down
and,
in
Oh,
Bitter
there was
Creek,
two or three of the Waltz boys in there, and
It
Clyde
was a
Ray
state road.
and.
You know, I've seen that road, Johnny,
Big
it's on that,
Quest for it.
on
Goes way back
And
up in
then Clyde
there.
Ray and the
Pretty
Big
close to
Quest
the
was
divide.
killed,
If you over at the
and I
divide
think
now,
the
it just
three Waltz
plunges
boys were
down
hurt
there.
real bad.
Still pretty good shape.
And see, the Waltz boys
Old
were
man
We came out to
stepsons
Bitter Creek.
of Matt.
And we met a
McCormick,
ranger
who
there.
had Max
Said, "You
Walk.
can't come through."
they were stepsons?
Forest is over 25 feet.
Matt
I'll
was
just go
married
around.
to
But
Carol.
Steve, was
So
he
they kept me kind
also?
of funny, so
Oh,
go ahead and
He's
go
the
through.
stepson?
Yeah.
A ranger?
Yeah.
Goodness.
No,
They
we're
were
rangers.
all married
Oh, a rank, oh, a rank.
back
One of the people
Uh-huh.
in the stables.
for a while.
We were
Then they
coming down.
divorced,
Uh-huh.
and he married
Okay.
again. Matt was married.
Yeah, that's what they were telling us.
I don't know how you guys keep track
I
of
know
those
it.
people. They
It's
change so much.
Well, they do,
National
but
Forest
when
is
you.
right over there. I was going around you. I guess you decided you knew what I was talking about.
But
I'll come
You
on.
probably knew more about it than he did, Johnny.
She was sure at that point you were local, not just somebody wandering around.
we didn't have as
That
many
stagecoach
people
road
in the
is-
valley
came down
either.
in the canyon.
It was
That's
easier to
called Bear
keep
Canyon.
track. There's so many people
then it
come and
went
go
to the
today
trappers,
that you
so-
don't
Boy,
hardly get a
you-
chance to.
uh-uh.
Did they tend to stick around
I've
longer
seen that.
back then,
Yeah,
even
but
if
I've
they
never
changed
known. I've never-
businesses?
They would
Walking
change,
out.
but it wouldn't be quite
Apart
as
from
often.
Bobcat down there, it's pretty
And
steep.
see, I hadn't met her till
They
this
want to get
evening.
in and out.
I didn't, I wasn't, I was sitting
So
there
those
thinking,
old
I wonder
trails.
if they know each other all of a sudden.
And I found my I'm so glad you asked me.
Well, I was trying to work
And of course, there's nothing us old folks like to do is talk about the good old days.
They like to hear it.
He always
There's a lot of
sprayed
people
you parts
that like
with
to
your
hear
Sounds like a
radio.
little bit of fun time to be here.
Doesn't
Oh,
it?
It was.
And he come up
It was. Our
where the
kids had a
Newcastle goes
glorious
across,
time in
he
Red
put
River.
that
They
cane on that
grew up
side
in a
and
good
crossed
time
right
in
there
Red River.
where Brett's sign is.
We just
He
turned
crossed right to
loose.
that
They
area
were
right
up
there.
flaggy and up
Oh,
against
states
the
are-
road
Do
horses.
their thing.
That's part, I guess that's part of it.
But today, they can't.
Well, it's still better than a lot of places.
Yeah, that's right.
Still
Right
better
now.
than.
I don't know how they went down
See
there.
those little old kids fishing or going around.
Yeah.
The parents don't have to worry about gangs bothering them.
No,
Nice team.
It's, but
I know it
not the
was
freedom
better
that we
then.
all had.
Salad.
What?
Today, they don't have quite the freedom that we had when we were growing up
I'm
here.
gonna have a big kid.
The
Oh,
kids
sounds
did. In Red River.
We had a good time.
No, we're still,
Very
we'll have a stoplight for long.
Me too, that was.
Oh,
fast.
gosh.
Where we're at.
Bite my tongue on that, but I know it's
So much
gonna
we don't know about the
happen.
area.
Well,
When
I
we
was
get curbs
there-
and sidewalks, oh no.
We'll get there and we really
Well,
don't
now I
know
can
what-
see that. I-
Well, and
I-
everybody
I don't
tells the
know
story
that.
different, or
I
has a
think we
difference
did,
in
Because
the
somebody's gonna
aspect.
get run down.
Maybe doing
When I
different
was a
side of it.
teenager, we used to
Yeah,
have
I've
a
seen
lot
different.
of race fights with the
Let us
Hispanics.
know and,
Oh,
you know,
well,
One year it got so bad that
Okay.
that
Okay, I'll do
year
it.
guys beat up some
I'll give you a call
Hispanics.
from the library or call.
either
And
way.
Linsnick was the sheriff.
I'll do it.
Because we'd love to see.
And they got a phone call that there were truckloads of Hispanics coming up from Cuesta. And I can still remember Linsnick sitting out in front of Tony's bar, and he had a 44 peacemaker, and he went, whoa. He says, I'm declaring martial law, everybody off the streets.
Well, then, you know, the Amarillo boys were real bad about coming up in the summertime.
Oh, they take the fights. Yeah.
Yes, and, in fact, our neighbor, Sid Baird was one of them that was up here, some of the loose boys from Amarillo.
The loose boys.
I was telling Jolene, I was at Tony's one night, and a bunch of Hispanics gathered around me, and they started throwing knives at me, and sticking knives around my toe.
Mumbly pet?
Yeah, like.
With your foot.
So I eased out to my Jeep, and I headed up the river, and they chased me, and I did all right, because I knew that road, so I don't know.
Sure,
I didn't stop at Mother's house, went on up to, there was this guy named Beck Atkinson.
right.
He had this huge hired head, 6'4", 300 pounds, and not an ounce of fat on him. And I says, I'm being chased by Hispanics. And he said, I'll go talk to him. He picked up a poker off the fireplace. No, we were only having fun.
Oh, sure. Well, you know, the summer, we never got through a summer when the Spanish boys from Cuesta was up here. They would be the pin boys at the bowling alley. But shoot, there was always fights with the gringo kids up here, you know, our store boys.
They have what they call
You never got through a summer without.
Son,
They
that
talk
was
about
kind of a
games.
fight.
that scared me.
They talk about games, and they had what they called the black shirt game. They were the ones that were chasing us. And when I first moved here, I worked for Skeeter, and I was working with Phil Rydell and Art Gomez. And
Oh, the black gang.
And I was talking to them about it one day, and they just kind of laughed. And they says, yeah, we used to be members of the black shirt.
They probably chased you.
Right, come off you.
But they just would try themselves. They'd get up here and think they could pull the wool. And of course, the gringo boys all thought, well, this is the occasion, you know.
We're on vacation, we can fight.
That was- I wouldn't have liked that though, because I can remember when my kids were here, there was this incidences with the kids from Cuesta, and it scared me.
Well, they got real bad. They
I was
beat up
scared.
a bartender at the New Bar D and detached a kidney. And
Whoa.
they picked a fight. They had a package store where the mining company is, and they picked a fight with that guy. I don't remember who it was.
Brown,
Yeah.
Brown.
And then they ended up killing somebody at Bitter Creek.
I heard about
That's
that.
right.
I
That's
paid
right.
workman's comp claim on that man.
You did.
Can you believe it? He was killed, he wasn't on the job, and then he got paid for workman's comp. His family did for his death.
Yes,
But there was a lot of hokey pokey going on
That was about
with that up
what it
there.
that. A lot of mess going on.
Really got bad
Remember
for a
that
while.
was, all those people that bought Lazy H before Sandy Twitty got into it, right?
Oh, Dode Hershey.
Yeah, Dode Hershey and Roland Betts.
Rolling bits, yeah.
We bought it from Big.
Wasn't too good a management, I think, was part of the problem. Heck, it all, it's been good.
We enjoyed it.
Ooh, we did
It's
good,
not clear
right?
how to-
Jolene, enjoy the food.
Okay.
Enjoy the evening.
Plan to.
I just
I'm not
thoroughly.
waiting today, so no coming tomorrow.
That was